Shalom Mashpaka, greetings to you in the name of Yahuah HaMashiach. To the 12 tribes who are scattered to the ends of the earth, greetings to you. So this afternoon I would like to touch base upon something that I've been looking into, which is the Balaam conspiracy. So, what actually happened in this conspiracy is, awesome to understand and how it relates to our time. So, to understand the conspiracy, we need to understand the context. So, when you read Numbers chapter 21, verses 21 to 35, the Amorites, the kings Sihon and Og, had already conquered Moab's territory north of the Arnon River. When YasharEL defeated Sihon and Og, they in turn took over the land, their land, which Moses later gave it to Reuben, Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh. You can read all that in Numbers chapter 32, verses 33, Joshua chapter 13, verses 15 to 23. And Keshbon was a city which was built by the Reubenites. So when I'll read out two scriptures which says in Numbers 21:26, for Keshbon was the city of Sihon, the sovereign of the Amorites, who had fought against the former sovereign of Moab and had taken all his land from his hand as far as the Arnon. And Numbers 32:37, it says, and the children of Reuben built Keshbon and Ilale and Kiriath Yamim. Okay, so geographically, YasharEL was now in the land formerly called Moab, but at that point it was an Amorite controlled area. All right. And that's how we also know Ruth the Moabitess, it says, was not a pagan, because as per the Torah, a Moabite cannot enter into the congregation of Elohim. Okay, so she was a Reubenite because Reuben built Keshbon, as we read in Numbers chapter 32, verse 37. So I won't go into the Ruth story. I've already covered that in my previous studies. So now building up to this conspiracy. So building up to the conspiracy, Numbers, tells us that the Moabites, they allied with Midian. So when you read Numbers chapter 22, verses 1 to 4, it says, and the children of YasharEL set out and camped in the desert plains of Moab beyond the Yarden of Jericho. Verse 2, and Balak son of Zippor saw all that YasharEL had done to the Amorites. Verse 3, and Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was in dread because of the children of YasharEL. Verse 4, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company is licking up all that is around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. And now Balak son of Zippor was the sovereign of Moabites at that time. So Balak, when we read these passages, we see that Balak, the sovereign of Moab, he saw what YasharEL had done to the Amorites, and he wanted to drive out YasharEL from the land they camped, and because he thought that these people will take over his reign. Okay, and Moab was in dread of the children of YasharEL, as we read. So they approached the elders of Midian for a solution. Now, who are the Midianites? So this is also very interesting to see that the Midian's origin was Abrahamic, but they were scattered, because when we read Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 to 2, after Sarah died, Abraham took a wife. Alright, and it says in these verses, then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran and Jokshan and Midan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. So the Midianites were descendants of Abraham, not through Sarah but through Keturah, his second wife after the death of Sarah, whom he married. So Midian was the son of Abraham by Keturah. His descendants are Abrahamic, but not part of the covenant line through Ishak. So this is what we need to understand. And Genesis chapter 25 verses 6 shows Abraham sent Keturah's sons eastward to the east country. They didn't settle in one defined land. Instead, they became tribal clans spread across the Arabian desert. So, when you read verse 6, it says, "But to the sons of the concubines whom Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living and sent them away from his son Ishak eastward to the land of the east." All right, so that shows that Abraham also had other concubines. So the Midianites were clans and they were not a centralized nation. So when you read Genesis chapter 37 verses 28, it says, "Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites." Okay, so it says over here, that the Midianites, the background of the story, right? So Joseph, actually his brothers, they hate him and they want to kill him, but in order to save him out of the hands of his brothers' wrath, so Reuben, says that Reuben and I think Yahudah, they say that why should we kill our brother? Why don't we sell him, to the Midianites? And here we read about the Midianites, the merchantmen. They are traveling merchants in caravans. All right, and here it says that they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Okay, so now when you read this verse, it seems to say that the Midianite merchantmen, they came, they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, okay, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. So the English language seems to say that the Midianite people sold the Joseph to Ishmaelites, but it's not that way, because it's his brothers who sold Joseph to Ishmaelites, and interchangeably, Midianite merchantmen is equal to Ishmaelites. So how do we know that? I'll come to that in it says in verse 36, the same chapter, verse 36. If you read over here, 37, 36. Okay, if you see here, it says, "And the Midianite had sold him," that is Joseph, "in Mizraim to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard." So if you read this verse to assume, verse 28, if you read and you assume that the Midianite sold Joseph to Ishmaelites, all right, then here in verse 36 we read that we just read, right, that sold him, where is that? Okay, here, the Midianite sold him in Mizraim to Potiphar. So which means that these Ishmaelites and Midianites were a mingled seed, because Midianite was a decentralized nation. They were tribals, clans living among different parts of the Arabian desert, and Ishmaelites lived in the wilderness of Paran. Okay, so it's obvious that one or more of the clan, they lived along with the Ishmaelites. So read both these verses and you will see that the Ishmaelites are equal to the Midianite merchantmen. Okay, because who sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites? All right, it was his brothers who sold their brother Joseph to Ishmaelites, which is equal to the Midianite merchantmen. Because if they were separate people, okay, then there would be a problem in the verse, right? Because in verse 36 it says, we just read that the Midianite had sold him in Mizraim. So if Midianite sold him to Ishmaelites, then how come Midianites are again selling him to Potiphar in Egypt? I hope you understand, and this is common sense. So their livelihood, that is the Midianites' livelihood, depends on moving between regions, not farming settled land. So this nomadic trading lifestyle fits a tribal, decentralized people. Okay, now if you read Numbers chapter 22 verses 4, it says, "And Moab said unto the elders of Midian, Now shall this company lick up all that are round about us." So the Midianites are called elders, which is a reference to tribal leaders and not a centralized monarchy. So they ally with Moab, again showing a loose tribal structure, able to join coalitions when threatened. Okay, so it clearly shows that among the Moabites, the Midianites, one of the clans of Midianites dwelt. Okay, one or more of them. That's how we understand. So I covered this. Okay. So the land of Midian. Now you will say that okay, you know, it is contradiction here, because when you read about Moses in Exodus chapter 2 verses 15, Moses kills an Egyptian man, and Pharaoh hears of this matter and he sought to kill Moses, but Moses flees from the face of Pharaoh and dwells in the land of Midian, it says, and he sat down by a well. So the land of Midian, all right, has no fixed borders. Okay, it's more like a region of grazing land and oasis in northwestern Arabia. So it's a part, these nomadic clans called Midian, all right, they were grazing their cattle, wherever there was grass, okay, and they camped over there. That's how we see Moses, all right, after he married Zipporah, all right, he took the herds to the back of the mountain of Mount Sinai, all right, to graze the flock, all right, and that entire portion was called the land of Midian. Okay, and we know that Mount Sinai is equal to Mount Horeb, and that's where Moses had an encounter with Yahuah for the first time in the burning bush. Okay, and another proof we see in Numbers chapter 31 verses 7 to 8, that they killed the sovereigns of Midian with the rest of those who were pierced. So Evi, Rechem, Sur, Hur and Reba, the 5 sovereigns of Midian. Now, if Midian was a centralized nation, how can there be 5 different kings? So these 5 different kings are nothing but tribal leaders. That's how we understand. 5 different clans, they were living with Moab. Okay, so this 5 kings suggests Midian was divided into multiple tribal chiefdoms, each with its own leader. No single king of all Midian. Each clan acted independently or formed temporary alliances. Okay, so the conspiracy. Now, what was the conspiracy? Okay, now we read in the text in Numbers that Moab was terrified by YasharEL, because YasharEL had captured the Moabite territory now under the kings Sikon and Og. All right, and they were afraid that their land also will go to YasharEL, so they consulted Midian, for which the Midianite clans gave an advice which brought severe judgment on YasharEL, and this advice was as per Balaam, which we will come a bit later. Okay, so to understand the conspiracy, we need to see 2 things first. Where was YasharEL camped at, and what was the conspiracy? So where was YasharEL encamped at? If you read Numbers chapter 33 verses 49, they were camped at by the Yarden from Beth Yeshimoth as far as Abel Shittim. Now Abel Shittim means meadow of the acacias, which is Strong's H63, and they it says in the desert plains of Moab. So like I told you that it was the entire region which was a wilderness journey or a wilderness portion, right, where YasharEL was camped, and that's exactly where the Midianites also dwelt, all right, in besides or within Moab, okay, in the Moabite territory, which was the wilderness, just like Ishmaelites. We read in Genesis that Ishmael lived in the wilderness of Paran. So this Numbers chapter 33 verses 49 talks about the encampment. Okay, and Numbers chapter 25 verses 1, it says, and YasharEL dwelt in Shittim. Now if you read Numbers 33:49, the entire name of that place is given, Abel Shittim, whereas the shortened form is used in Numbers chapter 25 verses 1. And what is interesting to see was this was their 42nd, YasharEL's 42nd and final station in the wilderness before crossing into Canaan. And the 42 the 42nd stop, I'm sorry, points to a final stop leading to Mashiach, as number 42 is used in Matthew chapter 1 verse 17, that is the 42 generations leading to Mashiach. So here the testing filtered out the people not worthy to cross over the Jordan to the promised land. Okay. Now what was the conspiracy? So let's see what the conspiracy was. So when we read Numbers chapter 22 verses 4 to 7, we read, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company is licking up all that is around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Now Balak son of Zippor was sovereign of the Moabites at that time. If you see, even YasharEL they had herds, right? And they were grazing their herds in that portion where Moab was, their land was. And we can see from verse 4 where Moab is telling the elders of Midian, alright, here they are termed as elders of Midian, which are the tribal leaders, saying that this company is licking up all that is around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. So means there will be nothing left for our herds. That's what it means. And it says, now Balak son of Zippor was sovereign of the Moabites at that time. Verse 5, and he sent messengers to Balaam son of Peor at Peor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of the people, to call him, saying, see, a people has come from Mitzrayim. See, they have covered the surface of the land and are settling next to me. Verse 6, and now please come at once, curse this people for me, for they are too strong for me. It might be that I strike them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Verse 7, and the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian left with the fees for divination in their land, and they came to Balaam and spoke the words of Balak to him. Now who was Balaam? So it appears that Balaam was a false prophet, but he was beyond a false prophet, and that's what we are going to see, because Balaam son of Peor, he appears in the book of Numbers as a Mesopotamian diviner from the Peor near Euphrates. So he was not a YasharElite prophet, but a diviner known for blessings and curses sought out by kings and rulers. He was nothing but a sorcerer. So when Balak, king of Moab, saw YasharEl's victories over Sikon and Og, we read that he feared this vast people, and that's how he sent for Balaam to curse YasharEl through a sorcery or divination, hoping spiritual manipulation would succeed where military force might fail. Okay, so though Balaam was a pagan diviner, it is interesting to see Yahuah sovereignly intervened, and 3 times he blocked Balaam's attempts to curse YasharEl, instead forcing him to speak blessings and prophetic oracles over them. So when we read Numbers chapter 22 verses 5 and 6, we see he sent messengers to Balaam son of Peor at Peor, which is near the river in the land of the people of his kindred, to summon him, saying, behold, a people has come out of Egypt, they cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land, for I know that whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. And we already saw that they came to Balaam with the fees for divination. We'll look at this word kesem in a bit, okay, which is Strong's H7081 and H7080. Numbers 22 verses 12, Elohim said to Balaam, you shall not go with them, you shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. Alright, so we see Yahuwah's intervention in not allowing Balaam to put a spell or cast a spell on YasharEl. Alright, why Yahuwah did it is a matter only known to Yahuwah, because it could be possible that Balaam was a very strong sorcerer or a diviner who the kings called for to bless people and to curse people for them when they went out to war, and probably his blessings or his cursings, all right, were very effective by using the demonic mediums, all right. And we know that the people of YasharEL were not perfect, and they were always grumbling, murmuring against Yahuah in the wilderness. They were deeply rooted, most of them were deeply rooted in sin, and Yahuah many a times told Moses, let me consume them all together for their hardness of their heart. But because Moses kept pleading by saying that, have you brought your people out of Mitzrayim to destroy them? Won't the people of the nation say this? And Yahuah restrained himself from destroying his people. So this could be one of the reasons why Yahuah restrained Balaam from cursing his people, and that curse could have affected his people, especially those who are living in rebellion against Yahuah, being in the camp. Okay, so that's how we understand. And if you see over here, Joshua chapter 13 verses 22, it says, and the sons of YasharEL killed with the sword Balaam son of Peor, the soothsayer. Here he is called as soothsayer, which is the word kasam, which is Strong's H7080, among those who were killed by them. So soothsayers, they have their origins in ancient occult practices like divination, astrology, spiritism, and fortune telling. They would use techniques like reading omens, interpreting dreams, or communing with familiar spirits to foretell the future or reveal hidden knowledge. Elohim directly forbids his people from consulting with mediums and spiritists in passages like Deuteronomy chapter 18 verses 10 and 14. The reason is that they ultimately rely on false mighty ones and demons for their information and power. So if you recollect King Saul, all right, whom Yahuah's Ruach had left him, and he approached a witch from Endor, who through spirit medium brought up the spirit of the prophet Samuel, and truth was spoken to Saul that he would die in the battle, isn't it? So that shows that that witch of Endor also was a powerful witch who through occultic medium could bring up spirits from the dead. Now many people say that she would have brought up a demon. We don't know what happened in the occult world, but it definitely spoke the truth to Saul, and in that battle Saul was killed. So that's how we know that she too was a soothsayer, the witch at Endor. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 18 verses 10, it says, let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through fire, or one who practices divination. So if you see the word over here, practices divination, twice kasam is used, all right. So, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer. Verse 14, for these nations whom you are possessing, do listen to those using magic, and to diviners, again the word kasam. But as for you, Yahuah your Elohim has not appointed such for you. So the nations that Yahuah was driving out before the face of the YasharELites, all right, are actually nations who were involved and believed in magic and diviners, all right, for divination. So if you see, even the Egyptians had diviners, all right. How do we know that? Okay, when Joseph was revealed to his brothers, he deliberately puts a diviner's cup in the sack of Benjamin, his younger brother, and he accuses his brother, saying that you have stolen my cup of divination. Okay, so we won't get into all that. It does not mean that Joseph was a diviner, but he wanted to show them that he was pagan, and he wanted to hide his identity, basically. Okay, not that he was a diviner, he was a child of Yahuah, but he hid a diviner's cup in the sack. We don't know how they use in divination a cup is used, so I'm not sure about that, because we have never been into the occult world. But this is enough for us to know that Yahuah Yahuah gave warnings, you can say, to his people, not to practice divination, or not to even entertain people who practice divination, and to drive them out from among them. So the word kasam is Strong's H7080 and 7081, as I said. It means to practice divination, seek omens, determined by lot, consult spirits. It's a verb that shows up in forms like kosem, which is a diviner, and mikes samim, which means divinations. And it's in contrast with Nabi, who is a prophet, because a diviner seeks knowledge through forbidden or human-driven means, whereas a Nabi, prophet, receives revelation passively from Yahuah. So the word hints at tampering with unseen forces hidden in waters of chaos by encircling or binding them. Diviners try to enclose secrets through rituals, unlike prophets who wait for Elohim to reveal. So Balaam starts as a soothsayer or a diviner, but in Numbers chapter 24 verses 2 to 4, he momentarily functions as a Nabi because Yahuah put words in his mouth, and did not allow him to curse YasharEL. So that's how we see this entire picture. Now Balaam's oracles. 3 times Balaam, he tried to curse YasharEL, and each time Yahuah turned the curse into blessing. He did not allow the curse to come out of his mouth, but whatever came out of Balaam's mouth was a prophetic blessing. So you can see how Yahuah defends his people, alright, even those who were rebellious at that time in the wilderness, because if Balaam would have cursed them by enchanting certain occultic things, so it could have affected the people, but Yahuah protects his people even if they are rebellious. Numbers chapter 23 verses 11 to 12. Then Balak said to Balaam, "What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have blessed them bountifully." So he answered and said, "Must I not take heed to speak what Yahuah has put in my mouth?" And in fact, Balaam even prophesied Mashiach, because if you read Numbers chapter 24 verses 17, it says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of YasharEL, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult." That's what the verse says. Okay. So why is Balaam called a prophet in 2 Peter? So when you come to the Renewed Testament, Peter calls him as a false prophet. Okay. A prophet. Because if you read, it says 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 15 to 16, "They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness." Remember, fees for divination. Okay. Here Peter calls it as wages of unrighteousness. "But he was rebuked for his iniquity. A dumb donkey speaking with a man's voice restrained the madness of the prophet." So even though Balaam is not a true prophet of Yahuah, he is temporarily functioning in the office of prophet because Yahuah put his words in Balaam's mouth. Numbers 23 verses 5, "Then Yahuah put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, 'Return to Balak, and thus you shall speak.'" Okay. Numbers 24 verses 2 to 4, "And Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw YasharEL encamped tribe by tribe, and the Ruach of Elohim came upon him, and he took up his discourse and said, 'The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of Elohim, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down with his eyes uncovered.'" So even Balaam acknowledges, that he's being used as a mouthpiece because he hears the words of Elohim, but he lacks the covenant loyalty and character of a true prophet. So Peter or Kepha uses prophet to emphasize Balaam had prophetic access only because Yahuah enabled him momentarily. Balaam's madness, the Greek word paraphronia, which means insanity, dearrangement, frenzy, is contrasted with Yahuah's control over him. Okay, why a she-ass? Now a she-ass in Hebrew is called athun. Okay, she ass, which is a donkey, in Hebrew is called athun. The male is called a chamor. Okay, so here athun is the she ass on whom Balaam rode on, and the she ass did not allow Balaam to go forward. In fact, she stopped him, and Balaam struck her 3 times, and Yahuah through the mouth of the donkey, through a man's voice, spoke to Balaam. Okay, we'll come to that a bit later. But what does athon mean? Athon is actually a lowly, common beast of burden. Humanity's earthly, fleshly nature is depicted because it has got the root words aleph tau, which is a divine signature, all right, in humanity of Yahusha himself, because Yahusha said, I am the aleph and the tau, the beginning and the end, Revelation 22 verses 13 in Hebrew thought. So the presence of aleph tau hints prophetically at Mashiach Yahusha, the aleph and the tau, and the suffix in athon, if you see here, un, all right, is the suffix, which is a uav nun. Uav is actually a hook, nail or connection, and nun is the seed, life sprouting. So together, connection to life or hook to the seed. So this suffix often turns a word into a noun form or indicates feminine qualities, which fits since an athon is a she-ass, a foil for kings and prophets who would be wise. But here Yahuah reverses roles, because if you read Numbers 22 verses 28, then Yahuah opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? So the mute donkey speaks truth, while Balaam, supposedly the seer, a diviner, is blind and spiritually deaf. Alright, because he cannot see the messenger of Yahuah right before his eyes, waiting with a sword. Alright. So Numbers 22:31, then Yahuah opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the messenger of Yahuah standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell on the face. So it's very interesting to see that the athon, that is the donkey, saw the messenger of Yahuah and was trying to save Balaam's life, all right, from being killed. And in fact, Balaam was striking the donkey, forcing it to go forward, because Balaam was spiritually blind. He couldn't see the messenger of Yahuah with a drawn sword in his hand, whereas the donkey could see. Okay, so this is the prophetic irony, that fleshly animal corrects the man of spiritual power. Balaam is reduced to being less perceptive than a donkey or a she-ass. Okay, so what is interesting to see is that even Yahusha rode on a donkey. Okay, and we see a contrast, because Balaam, a false prophet, riding to curse, Yahusha, the true prophet, riding to bless. She-ass athon rebukes him. Here donkey carries him humbly to Jerusalem. Aleph tau hidden in the athon, aleph tau revealed in Mashiach. Okay, this is the gematria of athon, which is 457. Aleph has a gematria of 1, tau 400, uav has got 6, and nun has got 50. You add all this, comes to 457. And prophetic tie-in is Balaam rode an athon 457. Alright, this was the gematria value. A humble beast containing aleph tau. Yet he failed to see Yahuah's messenger, whereas the athon, that is a she-ass, did. He falling short, Yahuah would preserve his seed in a covenant relationship and would not allow any soothsayer to cast any spell on his people for destruction. Alright, so Balaam struck athon 3 times. Okay, if we read Numbers chapter 22 verses 27 and 28, it says, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the she-ass, that is the athon, with his staff. What have I done to you? This is the reply of the athon, that is the she-ass. In a man's voice spoke to him, saying that, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? Okay, now here is the picture. The athon with the gematria of 457, let's saw the messenger, that is Malach Yahuah, very clearly. Balaam the seer was blind despite being a prophet or diviner. He struck the she-ass 3 times out of spiritual blindness and rage. So numerically, if you add 457 plus 3, all right, it comes to 460. Now what is the meaning of 460? If you read the Hebrew word 460 is the word miflatsoth, and miflatsoth, you can see the word in Deuteronomy chapter 7 verses 26. It says, you shall not make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything, neither shall you set up for yourself a pillar which Yahuah your Elohim hates. You shall not set up sacred stone which Yahuah your Elohim hates, nor shall you set up any abominable thing which Yahuah hates. Now this word abominable thing is the word miflatsoth in Deuteronomy chapter 7 verses 26, because it has the same gematria value of 460. Okay, miflatsoth means abomination, idols, horrifying thing, and so 460 directly connects to the abominable idolatry Balaam was complicit in at Baal Peor. The contrast of 460 in Mashiach, Balaam's Athon endured 3 strikes. Isn't it? 457 plus 3. And because the Athon saw the angel, alright, and it's showing the humbleness, voiceless and lowly carrying divine vision against the proud seer Balaam who is spiritually blind. Now look at Messiah. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter. The 3 days and 3 nights Yahusha endured also complete the striking, 457 plus 3. But instead of abomination, which is the word miflatsoth, alright, instead of that word, he becomes the perfect atonement, and those who acknowledge him but follow the old Jewish pattern are led to the abomination of desolation. What a beautiful picture if you understand this. So Balaam strikes the Athon, the she-ass, thrice, rises to 460, the abomination, alright, whereas in Mashiach, alright, we are all led to the true atonement. There's a contrast over there. So Mashiach struck, scourged, crucified, reverses abomination, brings redemption, whereas the rest are led to abomination of desolation. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten of Elohim and afflicted. YasharEL chapter 53 verses 4. So the prophetic meaning, Athon, having a gematria value of 457, the humble donkey or she-ass Balaam struck. If we add Gimel has a gematria value of 3, we pictographically it means a camel lifting up or giving up. Gimel is the pictograph of a camel walking in the wilderness. A camel is the one who can stay without food and water for a period of time, over a period of time. Okay, and if you add Gimel, alright, to Athon, we get the word Gathon, which is a wine press, and it shows that he treads the wine press of the wrath of Elohim Almighty. Revelation chapter 19 verses 15. This beautifully fits because Balaam's rebellion leads YasharEL to the wine press of Yahuah's wrath at Baal Peor. And Mashiach enters Jerusalem on a donkey, that is the Athon, and later bears the wine press judgment himself at Golgotha. So Gimel Tau, Gath, alright, meaning wine press, the place where grapes are crushed. Gath was a Philistine city famous for its giants. Goliath was from Gath. And 1 Samuel 21 verses 10 we read, and David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. Alright, Gath means wine press. 2 Samuel chapter 21 verses 20, there was yet a battle in Gath where there was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers and on every foot 6 toes. So the city is named wine press, showing it's a place of strength and pressing like giants, the pride and opposition to Yahuah. In scripture, the wine press symbolizes the pressing of grapes, which brings blessings and provisions, or the pressing of nations in judgment. All right, as stated in Revelation chapter 14 and YasharEL chapter 63. We read over here in YasharEL chapter 63 verses 3 and 4. It says, I have trodden the winepress alone, for the day of vengeance is in my heart. Okay, Revelation 14:19. So the messenger swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. So Gath becomes a prophetic picture, a place of crushing pride, the Philistine giants who come against the people of Yahuah, a picture of Mashiach's suffering and victory, and of final judgment on the nations. Now, we know that when Balaam tried to curse YasharEL, he couldn't, because Yahuah turned everything into a blessing out of his mouth. So, because the occult intention did not work, now here is the conspiracy. Okay, now this is where we read Numbers chapter 25 verses 1 to 5. And YasharEL dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. Verse 2. And they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones, and the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. Verse 3. Thus YasharEL was joined to Baal Peor, and the displeasure of Yahuah burned against YasharEL. Verse 4. And Yahuah said to Masha, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahuah, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahuah turns away from YasharEL. Verse 5. And Masha said to the judges of YasharEL, each one of you kill his men who are joined to Baal Peor. So we saw geographically YasharEL was now in a land formerly called Moab, but at that point Amorite controlled. This means the daughters of Moab could refer to women living in that land under Amorite control rather than true bloodline Moabites. Since the cursing did not work, Balaam advised Balak that the only way YasharEL could be cursed is if they commit whoredom against Yahuah. We can understand this from the words of Masha in Numbers chapter 31 verses 16. It says, look, these women caused the children of YasharEL through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against Yahuah in the incident of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of Yahuah. So Balaam advised Balak to use sexual seduction and idolatry to ensnare YasharEL. So the enemy could not overcome YasharEL by force, but through moral compromise, they could cut YasharEL off from Yahuah. Okay, so Numbers 25 describes how these women invited YasharEL to the sacrificial feasts at Baal Peor, leading them into fornication and idolatry. This alliance between YasharElite men and pagan women provoked Yahuah's anger, bringing a deadly plague on the camp. One YasharElite man, Zimri of the tribe of Shimeon, even paraded Cozbi, a Midianite princess who was the daughter of Sur, a Midianite leader, into the camp in broad daylight. Phinehas, grandson of Aaron, stopped the plague by zealously killing them both. So in fact, Zimri, the son of Zimri, from the tribe of Simeon, all right, he openly paraded means he openly brought Cozbi. Now Cozbi was a Midianite princess. In fact, he took her into the tent in the sight of YasharEL, and he was having sex with her in the tent. And that's how Phinehas, he took the spear and pierced both of them together to the ground and stopped the plague. Because of them, this plague came. See, such a big conspiracy this was, because Cozbi, the Midianite princess, all right, she was a daughter of a Midianite chief and was an instigator or symbol of the wider conspiracy. This was not mere personal sin, it was political and spiritual infiltration. So we can read this in Numbers chapter 25 verses 6 to 9. It says, and see, one of the children of YasharEL came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moses and before the eyes of all the congregation of children of YasharEL, who were weeping at the door of the tent of appointment. Now Moses and the children of YasharEL, they were weeping because they couldn't figure out why this plague came in, all right, and why people were dying, all right. And Shaul in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, he says, in a single day 23,000 men of YasharEL died. All right, and numbers text talks about 24,000 totally killed. That means the plague was at least for 2 days or a day and a half. All right, where men were just dropping down dead in the wilderness where they had camped in Abel Shittim. Okay, so that's how they came to know that this man, Zimri, he brought Cozbi in the sight of all of them and took her into the tent, and they were having physical relationship over there. And verse 7 says, and when Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation, took a spear in his hand. Verse 8, and he went after the man of YasharEL into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of YasharEL and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of YasharEL came to a stop. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. Here is the number, 24,000. Okay, who were killed. Verse 14 to 18 says, and the name of the man of YasharEL who was struck with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, a leader of father's house among the Shimonites. So Zimri, son of Salu, of the father's house among the Shimonites, okay, of the tribe of Shimonites. And the name of the Midian woman who was struck was Cozbi, the daughter of Sur. He was the head of the people of her father's house in Midian. And Yahuah spoke to Moses, saying, verse 17, distress the Midianites, and you shall strike them. Verse 18, for they distressed you with their tricks, with which they deceived you in the matter of Peor and in the matter of Cozbi, the daughter of a leader of Midian, their sister, who was struck in the day of the plague because of Peor. Now Cozbi's name is very interesting, because if you read, Cozbi is from the root word kazab, which means lie, deception and falsehood, and with the yod at the end, all right, as a suffix, Cozbi literally means my lie, my deception, or poetically, she is my falsehood. Okay, this fits perfectly with the role. She seduced Zimri, a prince of Simeon, as part of the Baal Peor cult, a fusion of sexual immorality and idolatry designed to deceive YasharEL and bring Yahuah's wrath. See how Balaam's conspiracy was, because he couldn't curse, he told Balak, well, do one thing. He brought among, with him all the, tribal chiefs of the Midianites, and told them, how they can go about with the conspiracy. And Cozbi was for, a daughter of a Midianite, tribal chief whose name was Sur, isn't it? So see how interesting this gets and how deep the conspiracy was. And I'm sure that many of us have read these verses so many times, and we may have never understood the entire conspiracy, how this happened, and why the New Testament texts warn us, right, against what happened at Shittim. Okay, so this location was at Shittim. We saw, right, Abel Shittim. Now Shittim in Hebrew means the acacias. The full name is Abel Shittim. We read in Numbers chapter 33 verses 49, which was the 42nd and the final stop before they crossed over Yarden to enter into Canaan. Alright, YasharEL was camped over there. So located east of the Yarden River, directly opposite Jericho, it's in the plains of Moab, a region YasharEL had just conquered from Sihon, king of the Amorites. We read, right, in Numbers chapter 21 verses 24 to 26. Now who dwelt there? This is where it gets interesting, because originally it was a Moabite land, then conquered by Sihon the Amorite. After YasharEL defeated Sihon and Og, the territory became YasharELite controlled, but still had Moabites and Midianites in the vicinity. Numbers 22 verses 4 tells us Moabites allied with Midian. We read, right, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company will lick up all that is around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. So even though Shittim was in YasharEL's temporary camp territory, there were still Midianite and Moabite women nearby, part of Balaam's plot, which we read in Numbers chapter 31 verses 16. Alright, read out that verse again. Numbers 31 verse 16. Okay, Numbers chapter 31 verse 16. It said, "Behold, these caused the children of YasharEL through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespass against Yahuah in the matter of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of Yahuah." Okay, so that's what it says. So it was through the conspiracy and advice of Balaam that all this happened. So Numbers 25:6, a Midianite woman, Cozbi, daughter of Sur, is identified in the very act of fornication. Numbers 31:15 to 16, Moses says it was the Midianite woman who caused YasharEL to sin at Peor. This suggests many of the women involved were Midianites living in the Moabite territory or intermarried with Moabites. So daughters of Moab could be a broad term for women from that region, not exclusively Moabite by blood. So the plan was devastatingly effective. It's devastatingly effective. Alright, YasharEL camped at Abel Shittim in the plains of Moab. And there, YasharElite men began to mingle with the daughters of Moab and Midian. Okay. Now, what is meaning of Abel Shittim? What is acacias? Strong's H63. So the word Shittim comes from the singular shitta, alright, which means an acacia tree, and the root word shatat, to pierce, scourge or whip. So if we read Yeshayahu chapter 41 verses 19, it says, "I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia," the word shata is acacia there, "and the myrtle and the olive tree." So the acacia is a thorny hardwood tree found in desert regions. Now this acacia wood, alright, was all over in the tabernacle. It was in the Ark of the Covenant, the altar, the tabernacle furniture, all were made of acacia wood. Alright, it says atse shatayam. Alright, we also see the same thing when Abraham went to offer Ishak, on the altar. Alright, he saw a ram caught by its horns in a thorn bush. Okay, so now this is again a picture of a thorny bush where the acacia wood always had thorns on it. Okay, and the ram's horns tangled in thorns forms a picture of substitution, that is, ram offered instead of Ishak, a crown of thorns encircling the head of the substitute sacrifice, as it says in John chapter 19 verses 2, "And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe." So Yahusha became the ultimate ram caught in thorns, his head surrounded by the curse of thorns, Genesis 3:18, the Ketsem, right? And his life offered as a substitutionary sacrifice for all mankind. So when we read Genesis chapter 3 verse 18, we see it says thorns, which is the cots of Ketsem, right? "Also and thistle shall it bring forth to thee, and you shall eat the herb of the field." So this was a curse that was put on Adam, alright, and that curse is reversed by Yahushua Mashiach because of the crown of thorns that was placed on his head. And that picture we see the ram caught by its horns in the thorny bushes. Okay. Okay, and these are a few scriptures in Tanakh, right? In fact, in Torah, which talks about the ark make of acacia wood. Exodus chapter 25 verses 10, verse 13. "You shall make staves of acacia wood and overlay them with gold." Okay. If you read Exodus 27 verses 1, "And he made the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood." Right? Can you see that? Exodus 27 verses 1. Exodus 36:20, "And he made boards for the tabernacle of acacia wood standing up." So acacia wood was used in almost all furniture in the tent of Yahuah. So why acacia wood? Because it's extremely hard and incorruptible, resistant to insects and decay, grows in harsh desert conditions, symbol of life and desolation. Covered in gold is a picture of humanity, that is wood, clothed in divinity, that is gold, speaking about Mashiach. Acacia's thorns prophetically point to Messiah's crown of thorns. We can also read that in Matthew 27:29, and they plaited a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Yehudim." So acacia thorns symbolize the curse of sin. Thorns and thistle it shall bring forth, as we read in Genesis chapter 3 verses 18. Messiah bearing a curse upon himself, Galatians 3:13. The hard enduring wood of acacia foreshadowing his sinless humanity under suffering, and tau is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet and carries the numeric value of 400, because if you see Abel Shittim, the gematria, if you add, alright, it comes to 397. Can you see this? 397. Abel is 33 and Shittim is 364. Add that, it's 397. Okay, and which is 3 short of tau, because tau has got a gematria value of 400. Okay, so the ancient Paleo Hebrew, tau was written as a cross mark or a sign, right, of the cross sticks, meaning mark, sign, seal, covenant, completion. It represents the finality of full measure, the end of a cycle. And it says in Ezekiel chapter 9 verses 4, and Yahuah said to him, pass through the city and put a mark, the word there is tau, upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that are done. So 400 is a mark of completion, covenant sealing at the end. Okay, and Genesis 15:13 says, and he said to Abraham, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. So 400 years is the full measure of testing in Egypt before redemption, and the prophetic picture is a period of bondage plus judgment completed, leading Exodus. 397 falling short of tau, completion, covenant, fullness. At Shittim, YasharEL was at the threshold of completion, crossing from Yarden into Canaan, but they stumbled at Baal Peor. They were 3 short of fullness. Okay, and here is what is interesting, because for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. It's only Yahushua HaMashiach. If you add 3, alright, the 3 days and 3 nights, 397 plus 3 is 400. He is the one who leads us to the completion of the covenant fulfillment, to the tau, to the stake, to the covenant, to the mark, the sealing at the end. Alright, so these 3 days and nights represents the full measure of testing, completion of Gimel, because Gimel has also got a gematria value of 3. Okay, so Gimel is the camel walking in the desert, passing through death, burial and resurrection, the transition to covenantal fullness. Remember, the camel is can stay without food and water for days together in the wilderness and can cross over, okay, and bring the one riding on it to its destination. Okay. Colossians 2:15, having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. So Yahushua is the picture of that Gimel leading us into the promised land. So it's such a beautiful picture over here. Okay. Prophetic picture is Messiah's incorruptible humanity enduring the wilderness. So the symbol is Abel Shittim. Tanakh reference is Numbers 25 verses 1. Fulfillment in Mashiach, YasharEL's final test in wilderness. Acacia wood Shittim, Exodus 25:10, Exodus 27:1, Exodus 36:20. Messiah's incorruptible humanity. Thorns of acacia, Genesis 3:18, crowns of thorns, Matthew chapter 27:29, and even we read in John, the Gospel of John. Gold overlay on wood, Exodus 25 verses 11. So there was gold overlaid on the acacia wood. It shows the divinity clothing his humanity. Ark of Testimony, Exodus 25 verses 10 to 22, Messiah as dwelling place of Yahuah's presence, John chapter 1 verses 14. Okay, so I will end this as part 1 because we have already reached 1 hour. Okay, I will continue in the second part because this is quite a bit of lengthy study, and there are so many spiritual meanings and typographies, right, that we can see and draw out the meat from these texts. May Yahusha Barak you. See you in part 2. Shalom.